Consciousness, one of the great mysteries of human nature and life in general. How are we conscious? How do we know if other people or beings are conscious? And can consciousness be artificial? Is it possible for a machine to possess consciousness? The Turing test was developed to test a machine's capacity for consciousness, to see if it was indistinguishable from a human being's, which is why it's fitting that Bulkhead Interactive chose to name their 2016 puzzler after Alan Turing's famous test. The Turing test is a first-person puzzle game tasking players to solve a series of room-based brain teasers framed within a morality debate between your playable character and an artificial intelligence. Originally released in 2016 on the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC, the version we're reviewing today is the Switch port, which was released a little over a month ago. So, today let's take a look at how this port measures up and, hey, maybe see if the Turing test is a game that belongs in your Switch library.
Morning, Eva. Your wake-up has been sanctioned by the ISA. We lost contact with the ground crew 450 hours ago. We have tried to establish further communications, but we are not getting any responses.
Set in the far future on Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter, you play as Ava Turing, an engineer with a research team tasked with studying the Arctic moon. Things hit a snag though when Ava is suddenly woken up from cryogenic sleep by the team's AI Tom, who claims Ava's team is in danger on the surface and needs her help to find them.
What exactly is the emergency?
The ground crew found an organism the ISA believed to be dangerous. We need to re-establish communication.
Immediately descending from your space station to the surface, Ava and Tom soon discover the modular base has been reconfigured in a way that only a human can solve and proceed through, a series of Turing tests, as the game puts it.
I wonder why the ground team has changed these rooms.
I have a hypothesis. These rooms are Turing tests.
Turing tests?
Thus, Ava tackles a series of puzzle rooms using nothing but her wits and fancy EMT, all the while conversing with her AI companion, who may or may not have questionable motives.
They really have completely repurposed these rooms. I am quite impressed.
If any of this sounds familiar to you, it should, because it's essentially the same setup to 2007's Portal, a game where you play as a female test subject, solving a series of room-based puzzles with a fancy white gun accompanied by an AI with questionable motives. To be fair, Turing does differentiate itself in a couple ways. The tone of the story is far more dramatic and leans heavily into hard sci-fi, a far cry from Portal's comedy, and the gameplay, while similar, clearly doesn't deal with portals. But you can really tell the developers adhered quite a bit to Portal's structure, right down to a few the cake is a lie moments the player can uncover if they're clever enough. It doesn't really hurt the game, but it does make the story rather predictable. But to the game's credit, the story it does tell, no matter how predictable, did keep me engaged. And there's some great examples of environmental storytelling, which I'm always happy to see.
Do you think you'd pass the Turing test?
I am quite capable of polite conversation. Wouldn't you say?
It was fun to listen to Ava and Tom's debates on human morality and consciousness, and I found the ending to be legitimately fascinating to the point that it essentially saved the whole story for me.
Okay, so you could solve these tests, but in a terrible fashion. Can you think of a solution to this one?
Chop off your arm and leave it on the button. That way the door will stay open.
Yeah, that's not a great solution.
Puzzles in the Turing test are a matter of redirecting a room's power in order to open up the exit. The base mechanic used to accomplish this is interacting with these little power boxes, which can either be moved from socket to socket, or by grabbing these little electro orbs and shooting them into unpowered sockets. Naturally, as you progress, more and more puzzle mechanics are presented to the player, whether it be different spheres that have their own unique properties or giant magnets that can be controlled. What Turing really nails, though, is teaching the player these new concepts. This is not a game that flashes tutorial text on screen when it wants you to learn something. No, this game directs the player into situations where they learn new mechanics organically, which is always the best way to do it. On the whole, though, the puzzles in Turing are very well designed. They're just difficult enough to stump you at times, but a solution never feels too far out of reach, and the game does a good job at making you feel smarter than you actually are, which is something every good puzzler should do, in my opinion. There were several puzzles where I thought I had it solved easily, only to discover a whole additional layer that I hadn't considered, making me rethink my strategy. These curveballs are what keeps the game fun. I do have my issues though. Despite how good the majority of the puzzles are, there are some rooms that kind of feel like throwaways. There are several points in the game where you might complete a series of 3 or 4 rooms, all with escalating difficulty, only to hit a few rooms after that offer very little challenge. And I don't mean rooms with lesser difficulty to teach the player new concepts, no, rooms that are well into the game's final acts. If the puzzle room doesn't pose a greater challenge than the room before it, it probably should have gone. For this last part, I actually have to put up a minor spoiler warning, so if you plan on playing the Turing test, I suggest hopping to this point on the screen. Okay, in the later chapters of the game, you are able to use Tom to control security cameras and sentry bots. This presents puzzles that require the player to think outside of the box and use different perspectives to solve puzzles late in the game, which is great. The problem is that it kind of kills the pace. See, up to this point, Turing has this really steady flow and momentum of slinging around orbs and dashing through obstacles. But when this gameplay element is introduced, the puzzles become very stop, go, as you are flinging your perspective around constantly. I think this is mostly exacerbated by the fact that Turing gets a little long in the tooth in its last few chapters. As I mentioned, there are definitely rooms that could have been cut, but at the same time, the game doesn't offer a lot of new mechanics in the later portions, besides the perspective switching and a few new colored orbs. This is coupled with the fact that the main mystery of the story is solved well before the final rooms. You really start to feel like you want things to just wrap up in the last chapter. It does overstay its welcome, but luckily not enough to sour the whole game. While not as visually sharp as its PlayStation and Xbox counterparts, the Switch version of the Turing test retains much of its visual splendor, being one of the better examples of how effective the Unreal Engine is on Nintendo's hardware. It's an impressive looking game with decent reflections and lighting brought out by a simple but effective art direction that, once again, takes some inspiration from Portal, but mixes it up with vibrant colors and architecture you'd expect from a space expedition. You will run into the occasional bug here and there were numerous times the performance would begin to falter on me, be it from poor frame rate or frame pacing. However, these issues don't stick out too aggressively due to the patient pace of the game. Musically, the game is serviceable. The score hits all the right notes of sci-fi while also sounding appropriate for puzzle solving, i.e. it largely stays in the background and doesn't distract the player. The only problem is there's not a ton of it. A lot of the game felt like it was playing the same 3 songs in a loop throughout the whole experience.
Okay, what are their chances of survival here? Oxygen, the food stores, waste management.
Everything seems to be in order. There was a small problem with the food stores, but the crew fixed that up.
I mentioned earlier how much I enjoyed the exchanges between Ava and Tom, and a lot of that is due to the strong voice performances from both actors. Marie Westbrook succeeds at presenting Ava as a skeptical, fearful, but resourceful protagonist, while James Faulkner's performance as Tom hits all the right notes for being a helpful, inquisitive, and ultimately indifferent AI.
It's been 6 years since I've seen them. Or anyone, actually.
They have locked all the doors. I would not expect a warm reception.
Well, at least they're expecting us.
These are very believable characters, and your opinion of them will be tested throughout this game. While the Turing test doesn't do quite enough to step out of the shadow of the games that inspired it, it's still easy to recommend to those that enjoy a good brain teaser and deep science fiction. The story may cause you to check boxes in your head, but it will also make you ponder the deep philosophical questions it poses, making it a tale that does stick with you after you're done playing. And the puzzle gameplay, while not always razor sharp, is well designed and executed. It's a great game for a relaxing weekend, made better by the fact that the port job to Switch was done exceptionally well, making for some good handheld fun on the train or, well, let's face it, on our couch. But that's it for me today. Thank you very much for watching this review of the Turing test. If you like this video and you like my style of reviewing, maybe consider subscribing and throwing me a like. I do reviews and I do Let's Plays along with other gaming content. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Kirk.Collects. Thank you very much. See you all next video, and please everybody stay healthy.